Hi, everyone. How you guys doing? Excellent. Earlier this year, my colleagues at MIT ran a study, which they published in Cell magazine, where they isolated rats and randomly gave one group saline solution and the other group cocaine. And they were doing this in order to try and understand the synaptic responses in dopamine neurons in the brain. And what they expected was that the cocaine-induced rats would see much more effect than the ones that were given saline solution. But what they saw instead was that both groups experienced tremendous changes in their synaptic responses. And they shook their heads and they sort of scratched their heads and they said, well, why is this happening? And they realized that what they had done is they had isolated the rats from one another, and these rats were essentially experiencing loneliness. And what they wrote the paper about was not about cocaine, but it was about how we feel the neural pain of loneliness, which inspires us to be social. And in fact, human beings are an amazingly social species. When I am away from my family, I feel this tremendously. This is my family here, and I'm the guy on the right with the dopey grin, looking like I just won the lottery. When I'm away from them, I sort of feel very, very lonely and get this sensation, much like the rats in the lab. And human beings have always been a very social species. We interact, we communicate, we cooperate, we coordinate with one another. We're always talking, we're always trying to message, and so on and so forth. But over the last decade, this sort of kindling fire of communication on the planet between us, we've sort of just doused it with gasoline, okay? We essentially have created technologies that massively amplify the ways that we affect one another through sharing information, sharing images, explaining the types of things that we're doing, other types of events that are going on in our lives, and so on. And these types of networking technologies, if you think about it, just 10 years ago, or maybe 12 years ago, we had email, phone, and fax. And today, we are indispensably linked with our phones, looking at Instagram pictures. Every day I wake up and I'm sort of like looking one eye with my Facebook feed and my Twitter feed and my Instagram feed, getting all sorts of information from all of the people that I'm connected to about what's going on in their lives. What are they doing? Where are they traveling to? What foods are they eating? What kind of products are they buying? Who are they voting for? What are their political beliefs? And so on, in this very amplified manner. And when you combine that with artificial intelligence algorithms, these types of technologies are telling us what to read, who to be friends with, what type of people to date, what type of political candidates to think about, and so on. And this is creating an opportunity for human beings to co-evolve with technology into what I would call something like the new social age, something that's much more hyper-socialized than we've ever seen before. And this has dramatic consequences for everything from business, for example. This is a UK Wired cover story, Commerce Gets Social, how your networks are driving what you buy. We buy a product and we like it or we share it, we take a picture of it, we rate it, and all of that information goes to all of our family and friends and everyone else on social media, and it reverberates through the population to create massive changes in demand distributions and how products are bought and sold. But it's not just about commerce. These same technologies help us organize into social movements and create, for instance, events like Tahrir Square, which Facebook was an essential part of and accelerating these types of social movements. And indeed, in terms of political campaigns, this year we're witnessing probably one of the first ever political campaigns that's run almost entirely from Twitter at 3 o'clock in the morning. And Donald Trump is succeeding at creating immense amounts of earned media attention without spending $1 in advertising in order to get his message out to the people that are listening. And it also affects our health. So we wear these fitness trackers on our arms, and these fitness trackers are telling us how many steps we're taking, how many miles we're running. And then if we're in a social network on that platform, it's sharing that information with all of our friends and people who are following us on these social networks. So what are the impacts of this kind of technology on our health? So what I try to do is I try to study how when we take a certain behavior or when we adopt a certain political opinion or other type of opinion, how does that behavior cascade out to our friends and change their behavior? And how does that behavior cascade out to their friends and change their behavior? And how do these behaviors reverberate through the social network? And I don't do it, unfortunately, in a simple context like this. I'm doing it in the real social network structure out there. This is a picture of a very small part of the Yahoo Instant Messaging graph, which we studied in 2009. This is a very complicated structure in which people are really influencing each other in all sorts of ways. And unfortunately, I don't study it in these small networks of 1,000 or 2,000 people, but in networks of hundreds of millions of people interacting all at the same time. Now, one of the major pitfalls in this type of study is not correctly understanding the difference between correlation and causation. So if you don't really understand the difference between correlation and causation, it could cause you to ask the wrong questions of your data. For instance, if you saw this data, you might ask yourself, is Facebook use driving the Greek debt crisis? Right? They're moving perfectly in lockstep. That's the number of active Facebook users and the Greek debt. Looks pretty convincing, right? Or for instance, did the use of the baby name Ava cause the US housing bubble? Right? I mean, it goes up, it goes down. Or my favorite, would M. Night Shyamalan start making good movies again if people bought more newspapers? Right? I mean, the correlation is tremendous. Now, in networks, what this means is I want to understand how my behavioral changes cause changes in my friends' and family's behavior. Not how they're correlated, but how I can change the way people think or behave themselves. So the gold standard of causal inference is experimentation. So we run experiments in real settings like Facebook and so on amongst hundreds of millions of people to understand how social influence diffuses and how behavior change diffuses through networks. So for instance, we ran an experiment on Facebook amongst 1.5 million people where we randomized the receipt of notifications on Facebook. So if somebody was going to take an action and that was going to be shared with all of their friends, we randomly blocked some of those messages. So imagine I'm standing in the center of my social network and my friends are sort of all around me, and a message that's going to go out to all of them, only some of them are randomly selected to receive that message. Then we can measure, well, what is the effect of that message on the friend's behavior by measuring the difference between the behaviors of those that received the message randomly and those that didn't. And when we do this kind of study in this kind of population, we can learn some tremendous things. So for instance, what I'm showing you here is a graph of your own influence over your friends on average on the y-axis and your own susceptibility to the influence of your friends on the x-axis. This is a heat map, so the white hot areas are areas of high prevalence, and the dark areas, there's not a lot of people there. So what you see is that people who are highly influential tend not to be susceptible to influence, and people who are highly susceptible to influence tend not to be influential. And there's this general gradient or trade-off between influence and susceptibility in the social network. The more influential you are, the less susceptible to influence you are, and vice versa. And this can explain a lot of really important things in society, like, for example, why Kanye West on Twitter has 26 million followers but only follows one other person, okay? And the network structure matters as well. So if you look, for instance, at your own influence mapped against your friend's influence, you'll notice that there's a group of people right in the middle who are not only influential, but who also have influential friends. And that's a really good group of people to target with a message to spread the message farther and faster, because it's going to have 2- and 3-hop influence in the network. Now, that is an example of how this type of influence cascades in a social network. But this is also happening in crowds of people that are not necessarily connected to each other in personal ways, like on a social network. For instance, prediction markets are a great example, or the ratings and review systems that we all use every day to decide which books to read and which products to buy and so on. So for instance, on Yelp, what you do is you rate products and then everyone else comes and says, well, I want to see how what the crowd's unbiased opinion of this product is. I'm going to go look at the star rating. So, brief story, I went to a restaurant in New York called Dojo, and I had an average experience at this restaurant. So I thought the food was sort of average, the service was sort of average, the prices were sort of average, and I wanted to rate this thing on Yelp. So there I am, I'm logged in on Yelp. That's where I'm going to put my rating. It's an average restaurant, so I want to give it 3 out of 5 stars, right? That's average. So I'm going to put this 3-star rating right here, and right next to where I would rate and put my own opinion is Char H and her bright red 5-star rating, waxing poetic about how the prices here are amazing and the sweet and tart ginger dressing was just so good. And I read this review and I think to myself, well, she's got a point there. The prices were pretty amazing, and that sweet and tart ginger dressing was really good, so I gave the place a 4 instead of a 3. And then I stepped back and I thought to myself, is this good? Is this what should be going on? These platforms are supposed to give us ostensibly the unbiased opinion of the crowd, but now I'm being influenced by the person that rated the product before me. So I'm thinking to myself, well, this could go in very wrong directions. So we decided to do an experiment about it where we randomly manipulated the ratings on a website like Reddit.com. So it's a social news aggregation website. You post articles and then you rate them, thumbs up or thumbs down. So we went in and we randomly manipulated the ratings so that the first rating on an item that was born on the website would either be randomly assigned to be thumbs up, thumbs down, or we leave it alone, and that was the majority, the control group, which we didn't alter at all. So we randomly manipulated these ratings, and we wanted to see, well, what is the effect on the ratings if we just give this one small perturbation of the ratings at the very beginning? And there are thousands of ratings on each of these items, and here's what we found. So essentially, a single thumbs up at the beginning of the ratings process increases the mean rating of an item by 25%. So what happens is that my thumbs up rating cascades into the next person's likelihood to like it, and the next person's likelihood to like it, and so on. And these distributions show you the distribution of ratings for those that are in the down manipulated group in blue, the up manipulated group in red, and a thin gray line for the control group where we did nothing at all. And what you see is the upwardly manipulated group is shifted entirely to the right, meaning that the ratings have changed dramatically. And this creates superstar effects in the ratings. So this positive herding snowballs into rating stardom. If we give you a thumbs up at the beginning randomly, you're 30% more likely to exceed a score of 10 than you would if we did nothing for you. And that's no small feat because the mean rating on this website is 1.9. So with a 30% greater likelihood, with a single upvote at the beginning, you just shoot off into the stratosphere of ratings and popularity, just with this small perturbation that creates a path dependence in the opinions of the crowd that come after it. And what's the implication of this? Well, the implication is that human beings are herd animals. We follow the herd, and we just heard a great talk by Francesca about how we conform to the opinions of others that we see. And this could have dramatic implications for not just ratings, but housing bubbles and stock market bubbles and so on. And this is just a clip from the great crash back in 1929, and it says, deluge of panic selling overwhelms the market. 19 million shares change hands, and so on. As we see other people selling, we start to think to ourselves, what is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact me? And then I start to sell in a panic setting. Another implication is about fraud detection. So in this case, Reddit has a machine learning algorithm that tries to find fraudulent reviews. And when it finds one, it rips it out of the system. But that does nothing to the systematic bias that has seeped into all of the legitimate reviews that come after that fraudulent review. You're not going to rip those out. Those are actually real reviews that are being biased by the fraudulent review. And the big takeaway from that is that maybe preventing behaviors that we don't want to see in society is a lot better than punishing them after they occur, because when we see them happen in society, they reverberate to the next person, to the next person, and to the next person. And during when we wrote this paper, it was the 2012 presidential election, and I was seeing a lot of news stories on NPR and so on about polls. Who's up in the polls, who's down in the polls, what's the favorability rating? And I started to ask myself, given this research, are these polls predicting who's going to win the election, or are they actually driving who's going to win the election? Are they changing the way people will vote because they get this information about how other people are thinking about voting? We also wanted to look at how this affects our health and our exercise. So we worked with a major global fitness tracking company, and we collected data over 5 years on nearly 14 million runners with nearly 500 million running events. And this is sort of a weekly snapshot of how people run on average. They run in the morning, they run more on the weekend, and so on. And it also comes with a social network where you can follow other people's running behavior. There are many of these products out in the market today. So we know who runs, how they run, when, where, and how fast they run, and who their friends are in a global network of runners, okay? And what we're really interested in here is, as we see other people running, what does that do to our likelihood of running, and how far we run and how fast we run? So we really want to know, is exercise contagious? And is this technology sort of fostering that type of contagion? But we can't really experiment here, because we can't walk around with a cattle prod and randomly prod some people to run more and not prod other people to run more. So we have to find some source of exogenous variation that performs that natural experiment for us. And so what we go with is the weather. So it turns out that when it's really raining outside, we don't run, and when it's really nice, we tend to run, and the weather is sort of random. And so here's running and precipitation in New York City. Every time you see a spike in blue, which is precipitation, you see a drop in running, which is the green. And so we also have GPS data on these folks. This is running on a sunny Saturday in New York City. You see Central Park light up, as people run. A few people run in New Jersey. I didn't even know that happened. This is running on a rainy Saturday in New York City, and there's just a lot less activity. People aren't really going out and running. So we collected data from about 40,000 weather stations from 37 different countries. And what we're trying to do here is to say, when it rains in New York City and it suppresses the running, does that affect the amount of running that happens in Phoenix, Arizona, for instance? Because if that's true, the only way that that can happen is through the social influence of the runners in New York City affecting the runners in Phoenix. And what do we find? We find massive peer effects. So essentially, if you run a kilometer more, it will cause your friends to run 0.3 of a kilometer more. If you run faster, it will cause your friends to run faster as well. The basic point here is that our behaviors reverberate throughout the network. And technology is accelerating these peer effects in our society. And this can be both empowering and debilitating. So think about the Ice Bucket Challenge, which was an internet meme to raise money for ALS. This internet meme gained a lot of traction and sort of went viral. 17 million people created videos. Nearly 500 million people watched those videos. And they raised $115 million for ALS in 6 weeks. Okay? But it can also be debilitating. Everybody remember Tay, the chatbot on Twitter from Microsoft? So Microsoft put this chatbot out on Twitter. It says, here's the official account of Tay. The more you talk, the smarter Tay gets. And what happened? We talked and talked and talked, and Tay became a racist, sexist, homophobic, slur-tweeting chatbot. Okay? Now here is the takeaway from this evidence. The network is content agnostic, okay? And what it does is it reflects and magnifies our own beliefs and behaviors. The more we behave in a certain way, the more we're going to influence other people to think and behave in that certain way. And I remember growing up watching basketball as a kid, and I remember Charles Barkley saying to me, I'm not a role model. But the problem now is that we're all role models. Everyone is looking to everyone else to understand what's right and what's wrong. We have to be a lot more responsible in terms of how we deal with this kind of behavior. If we're going to create a global network of positivity and prosperity and equality, we need to reflect those values in our behaviors so that they influence our friends and family to also think in similar ways. And meanwhile, at MIT, we'll just keep calm and loving science. Thank you very much.